You're listening to The Tarot Diagnosis. I'm your host, Shannon. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, and I also happen to have a love for tarot. Each episode, I invite you to reflect with me as I work to demystify the tarot and the human experience, all while exploring tarot's connection to mental and emotional health. While this podcast may feel therapeutic, it is not meant to take the place of psychotherapy. So grab your cards and join me as I work to create a pathway to better understand ourselves and those around us. I am so excited to share this episode with you all. I had the opportunity to sit down with Sam and Aussie, a couple and castmates from the Netflix hit show The Ultimatum Queer Love, which debuted in May of 2023 and follows 5 couples who disagree over whether or not they're ready to get married. This might seem like a departure from my typical content, but Sam is actually a tarot reader, and both she and Aussie infuse tarot and mental health advocacy into their daily lives and into their relationship. I'm so grateful to Sam and Aussie for getting vulnerable with me and opening up about how profoundly healing tarot has been on an individual and relational level, both on and off Netflix. I feel like I could chat with you all like just randomly about all kinds of things. And it's because the two of you really do have this special, unique energy that I'm sure people tell you that all the time, but there is something so warm and inviting about the two of you. You know, I remember when we originally spoke a couple of weeks ago, you know, there's that weird parasocial relationship where, of course, I watched you on Netflix's, you know, Ultimatum Queer Love. So like, I knew of you, but there's something when you're actually talking to you that it does feel like you're kind of old friends. And I feel like the two of you just have this really sweet, calm, warm, inviting energy. And I think that's also really evident on the way you interact with folks on social media. So I just want folks to know, like, you're even better like in person than on the show.
That's really sweet of you, Shannon. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you both being willing to even come on here and talk to me because, you know, seeing you on the show, I found that there was such a unique kind of dynamic and experience that was happening or unfolding in your relationship. You know, as a therapist, I was like, oh my gosh, like there's so much happening here. And I can't believe we're all bearing witness to this, you know, really all the couples. But what drew me to you was, of course, in the beginning, Sam, you had made this comment that you were into tarot. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, cool. But then, of course, tarot never showed up on the show, which was super disappointing, right?
Yeah. My 1 second to fame. Tarot.
They were like, you get 1 second to say the word tarot, and that's it. So when I reached out to you, I was really elated that you were like, yeah, let's meet up and like see if this is a good fit. So I appreciate you both being willing to come on and talk about your experience and then talk about the role that tarot has played in that and in your relationship, because it seems, at least from our previous conversation, that tarot does have a big role in that.
Oh, yeah. 1,000%. Yeah.
So can we pull a card to open the episode?
Ooh, yes,
Sweet.
absolutely.
All right. So I'm thinking, typically when I open the episode, I don't even pull to a question, but I thought today we could pull to a question just to help guide the conversation. So I'm thinking we could pull to, what role does tarot play in building strong and healthy relationships? Let's see what comes up. And Aussie, I'm curious, do you ever pull cards or do you let Sam pull for you?
So I am 90% of the time Sam pulls for me.
Yeah.
But there have been occasions where I feel strongly that I got to pull for myself and I've gotten, you know, great results, obviously. But yeah, majority of the time it's Sam that I go, can you, because I'm feeling blocked. Can you help me with it? You know? So
I love that. I feel like even just that, and I had a feeling because even just that dynamic and experience shows how beneficial tarot can be in a relationship, because in that moment you're being vulnerable and going up to your partner and saying, hey, can you do this? And Sam, it gives you an opportunity to show up for your partner. So I love that.
Interesting.
Same. Okay, what did you pull?
Well, I was actually drawn to an oracle deck. So I was drawn to my Gateway Oracle. And the first one that flipped over is Flying Free. I unfurl my wings and fly. So I'll show you what this looks like.
Yeah.
Just like riding on a giant dove.
Yeah. So what does that bring up for you in terms of how these cards can help build strong, healthy relationships? Because I feel like there's a lot in that imagery.
Well, let me show you the second one. And then, because they definitely go together. This one is called Proceeding Softly.
Very perfect. Very fitting.
My inner power grows in moments of quietude.
Oh.
So
it's sweet.
For me, I'm getting the expansive feel to it, the sense of freedom, but then the proceeding softly is very much so let's not just power through it. Let's be intentional with what we're doing. Let's have peace. And there's a sweetness to these cards. And I feel like they really come off there's this adventure, but there's still an appreciation for, the present moment and the things that we have now. And so, yeah, in terms of the relationship, that seems like a great balance. The softness, but the freedom to explore.
It really does. It's actually making me think of how we can be incredibly reactive in relationships when we are so heightened and when we experience something that maybe, I don't know, hits a pain point, or when we feel like a loss of a sense of control or even justice. So to pull those cards reminds us that we need to sometimes purposefully pause and say, hold on, what's really happening here? Which is really exciting that that's where that went, because I pulled Judgment. But, and I feel like a lot of people have different relationships with the Judgment card. I know for a while for me, I had a really complicated relationship with it, but I started viewing the card more as an examination. And I think that can hold true in terms of using tarot for a relationship, because we could be invited to examine, okay, what role are we playing in whatever it is we're experiencing, or what was our expectation of this interaction? What's my value here? Or what do I value, and why am I experiencing this feeling or thought about my relationship? Or even how can I maybe be more intentional, going back to your cards, with what I need or what I want out of the relationship? Because I think Judgment encourages us to look at things that maybe were previously unclear for us, and maybe even unclear for our partner. So yeah, Tarot's saying, hey, when you are at a loss for words or what to do, or you're feeling really activated, stop and pull a card and I will help guide you.
Yeah. And one of the funnier things that came to mind too was using our judgment, because some things can free us up to all of these amazing possibilities, or they can send us to our graves.
Oh, that's so true. And it's interesting that we are talking about the word judgment and the card Judgment in terms of relationships, because I wouldn't have expected that, right? It seems a little off, but the way that we're describing it does, and it goes back to the words that you were kind of using with the oracle cards, it softens that experience. And even though our partner, we're talking romantic partners right now, so even though our romantic partners are typically the people that we can be the softest around, they're also the types of experiences where maybe we feel like we have to be the most defensive. So we have to work to bring that down. So really fascinating. Yeah. Thank you for pulling a card to open the episode with me.
Yes.
But, talking about how we use tarot in relationships, you two had both said something in our previous conversation that really stuck with me. And it was this concept of healing together, which I really loved because, from a therapeutic standpoint, I think we neglect that aspect in relationships. We always focus on, well, what are you doing to heal? What am I doing to heal? And even when couples come into my office, I hear this all the time. I'm sure you see it too, where people are like, oh, this person needs to change this, and then they need to change that. And they're so focused on their partner. And it's my response is always, listen, I know it's easy to focus on the flaws of other people, but what needs to be worked on or healed together within the relationship? And I feel like the two of you have so much going in terms of that. So I really want to hear what that means for you, how it shows up in your relationship, and how the show impacted all of that.
Yeah, I can start. I've always been, I guess, a big advocate of conscious partnership, meaning that it's, equal partners doing their own individual healing work alongside each other. And, because you're doing that, and you have each other for support, and that the purpose of that relationship is for your individual healing as well as coming together and healing in that relationship. I think having a partner who understands that purpose and works with you is so powerful. I think it's like a stadium light shining on you versus, going to therapy individually and having a lamp shine, because having that intimate partner hold up a mirror to your things that you haven't healed is a way of, rewiring your brain, rewiring your belief systems that you've been, carrying that aren't working for you any longer. So having that safe space to do that work with, and again, safe is the key here. It can be so powerful. So I think during filming, I didn't actually know that I knew there was some, history of trauma from my childhood, but I hadn't tied it to the dynamic that we would get into when we have our, disagreements. And it's not to say that the other person isn't doing the thing that's bringing up the thing. It is doing the thing that's bringing up the thing. But what it is now is, how do you respond to it? And can you actually look deeper than just the symptom of it showing up? So digging down into, the crevices of something that you haven't even known was there, and excavating that and bringing it to light, and the both of you to be able to share that experience and help each other work with it and dive into and explore and be conscious of and be, patient and kind around. I think that's kind of like God's work,
Beautifully said. Yeah. What about you, Sam? Like, how does that show up for you?
Yeah. I think it's also interesting because our lives and our interactions, to an extent, were shown on, a global network that doesn't normally happen. And so there was a lot of trial and error leading up to that. And there's been a lot of trial and error since the filming concluded and since airing, right? And so I think it's just one of those things to even remind people of, like, we weren't just like magically born into this dynamic and we just like figured it out and have all the answers now.
Right.
But it was really something that we kind of learned over time. And a lot of it was a self-awareness journey. A lot of it was uncovering subconscious layers that we weren't even aware of. Mm-hmm. And we definitely triggered them out in each other many times. And even then it took a little while to even make the connection of what was showing up and why. And so I guess like that is one way that spirituality and tarot really helped me personally too, is I'm already more of an introverted person. I have a lot of processing that happens on just in my alone time and spending time with myself, whether that's with music or writing or some form of art. And so tarot for me kind of added another layer to that, where I was almost able to communicate with myself, but indirectly.
Absolutely.
And so some of these interactions that we had, and I feel like that we can go so much more in depth with this, but for the purposes of not going on for an hour just about this one thing.
I know. I'm like, everything I want to talk to you about could really be like an episode in itself. So I know. Sorry.
There were these moments where it was like one aspect of it was coming to the realization of everything, at least in my belief and, Aussie's belief, and we've talked about this a lot. It's all about our internal first, and our external is this reflection of our internal. So anytime something feels discordant or something strikes a chord or an emotion, it's like finding that root on an internal level. So just to what you're saying, right? It's so easy to be like, oh, this person can change that, and it would only be better if they did that. But what we're really doing is just completely giving away our own personal power. We are expecting things around us to change, which is also not digging deeper, like, all right, what's going on inside? And also realizing that just because our actions upset someone else doesn't mean that it's not the right thing for us or them. So yeah, like going deeper and deeper, right? I'm like relating this to my childhood and both of us being people pleasers and, wanting to care about the external. Then we're forgetting that by causing this discomfort in someone else, we're also helping them on their journey of whatever they're meant to go through. And by trying to people please that out and keep everyone on the surface level happy, we're actually robbing someone of a potential healing experience and a part of their journey. So it's like a mindset shift, but yeah.
Everything that you're saying is so powerful and so important. And I think at the core of what you're saying is, there's layers of codependency there, right? Because you're talking about people pleasing and, we can't set ourselves on fire to keep other people warm. And when you are accustomed to that behavior, you want to do whatever you can to avoid discomfort. But when you avoid discomfort, you avoid growth. And something else that you had talked about earlier made me think about, because both of you were experiencing huge transformations and shifts and realizations and just really vulnerable relational stuff, like you said, on a global scale. Like, I don't know what the number of views are, but I'm assuming it's a lot. It's probably, maybe you don't want to know, it's probably scary. But so, other people have this really interesting perspective and view into what's happening. But they're not in it with you. So you might not even be aware of what's unfolding, but the way things have been edited, other people are seeing things a very particular way. So I'm assuming once the show came out and people were giving you their opinions and their thoughts, like that was really hard to sift through and work through, because it's like, okay, well, you're also only seeing edited versions of this. You're not truly in it. So it's going back to the judgment card. It's really easy to judge, right? So, I assume that your healing experience, both individually and together, has been probably vastly different, but still inspired by the show, both before, during, and now after filming. Because, you filmed a while ago. I think, what was it, back in 21?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so like
half ago.
Yeah, so what's happened since then that maybe you've realized that the two of you need to continue working on, or what sort of healing processes are different for you now that you are post-filming? And how has kind of the experience of having an audience watch your relationship affected that?
Yeah, I would love to go first.
Please.
I know that for me, it was quite surprising and shocking to get some of the hate that I received after the second batch released. And at that point, I actually wasn't rewatching the show or watching it because it was quite triggering. But because I had received those kind of comments, I was like, what's going on? Like, that's really weird. And I ended up watching I think 5 through 8 episodes and taking notes and everything, because I was like, if I'm going to be, watching it and not feeling too good about it, I might as well take notes and like get something out of it.
For real, yeah. But bring it to your therapist.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I did. So yeah, it was just surprising. But then what I learned through that experience is that, oh wow, people are actually watching it through their own lens, their own experience,
right.
Receiving it in a way that is, whatever's bringing it up for them is, through their lens. It's not mine.
Yeah.
You're seeing like 1%, maybe even like, 0.1% of what happened. You're going to assume this because of your own lens. So it took me a while, but I had to distinguish between, okay, that's someone's experience and that's how they seen something through 1% of what really went down.
Right.
So it was hard initially, but then I learned that, and I was talking to therapists and close friends and Sam, and just having good support system around me, because I can see how it could be really tough for people to go through something like that. if they didn't have the support system around them.
Yeah.
Would have been very detrimental to someone's mental health.
Mm.
So, and it was the first time I'm not a social media person. So it was the first time I was experiencing this kind of world too. And so navigating that was also like, oh, wow, like there's so much hate. What? I went on the show to show all of my flaws and all of my, things so that I can help somebody. And here is hate at me. So it freed me up to see this other perspective. Again, you talk about growth, and that's what I learned. Oh, there are different lenses. People are seeing this from different viewpoints, and it's my inner work now to not get triggered and to not be angry at that person, but to do the inner work and go, compassion, because they've gone through something that you don't know about. So there's no point in me judging them. It's only the way that you're going to stop this kind of cycle is if we can take a step back, breathe. What's coming up for me? Oh, anger. Okay, why is anger? Why is it frustration? Why is this? Why is that? And doing that, digging down, because there's something there within me that's like reacting to this. So now I'm in a place where I can actually look at some negative comments and things like that. And I don't have that trigger. I don't have that, oh my gosh, how can they see me in this light? How can someone think this of me? Now it's just, there's a space in between. And I'm like, so thank you those haters. But now I have to do that work, and I can kind of give space in between my experience and their experience and have compassion for that as well.
Yeah, you bring up such a good point. There's a quote, Carl Jung's really popular in, shadow work and depth psychology and in the tarot communities. And he says something along the lines of, what bothers us basically about other people as a reflection of something that we're basically insecure about. And I think that's exactly what you're sharing right now. And it's a tough lesson to learn and even experience radical acceptance around, because as humans, we desperately want to control how we're being perceived by other people, because we are tribal and communal by nature. From an evolutionary perspective, we need a group to belong to in order to survive. Our brains have not processed that. We still need people to live and thrive, but like, we're not going to die tomorrow if we're rejected from a group. And so when we experience that sense of communal rejection, it kind of activates that primal side of us of, holy shit, I need to redeem myself. These people need to accept me because I can't be the outcast. And it's really terrifying to go through that whole process of being like, hold on, I'm actually safe right now. I'm not actually in danger. So yeah, there's that component. And then also it's other people's shit, it's their baggage.
You just spoke the truth there about the energy flowing through. Like, I've got to redeem myself. I've got to correct the narrative. I've got to, there was this like burning sensation, like, no, this is not me. You're getting this wrong. Yeah. And then working through that, through therapy, with people supporting around me, that was, I'm grateful for it all,
Absolutely. Yeah. What about you, Sam? Like, what sort of individual and relational healing has happened even post filming?
I feel like all of these questions are so loaded.
I know. I'm a therapist. I'm sorry.
I know. I'm like,
no big deal.
All right, where do we start here?
I love your questions.
Oh no, they're amazing questions.
I appreciate that.
I feel like because we had so much intention around this whole like healing journey on an individual and level and as a couple, it's almost like we were on this like fast track.
Yeah.
And then being in the show itself was like its own version of a fast track. And so it's like, I feel like the amount of things that we've gone through, even just like 1 month of time, is like what others might, work on for years, is how it feels. And so it was actually really challenging, but it has really brought us so much closer together. It has built our level of intimacy, our level of trust, our level of safety, our love, like all the above. We have actually gotten so much more that we weren't even expecting, because it has also caused us to challenge our own sense of like perception, our own sense of like security and what we know to be true. And like, it kind of just like got us and just threw us into the ocean. And we're like, just like, we're going to figure this out, but I guess we'll figure it out together. And I think like one of the challenging aspects of it too is like, because our experiences are kind of very mirrored to each other. So they're almost opposite, complete opposite in a sense, where we were really needing to figure out how to navigate what Aussie was receiving, especially after that second batch of episodes before everybody kind of found out the big reveal in the reunion of what that actually was like for Aussie in that trial marriage. And then for me being shown in the very opposite light. And so we were navigating like, okay, this is really difficult because there's a lot of this like hate and a lot of challenges and a lot of why are you still together? You blah, 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 all of that. And then at the same time, I'm like, oh, I'm finally being recognized for all of this, the things that I've been wanting to talk about and share with the world. And so that was like really hard for us, like how to hold space, but not minimize my experience either and what I was going through. And so when we're talking about figuring it out, like we had to figure it out.
I mean, I feel like what you're describing is like, if to bring tarot into it, 6 of Wands and 7 of Wands at the same time, because here you are like feeling seen, 6 of Wands, like being able to celebrate your own personal growth and insight and just like way of existing. But then at the same time, that 7 of Wands, like standing on that hill, like having to like defend yourself and like set a boundary and protect not only the way you're showing up in your relationship, but the way your partner's showing up and how the two of you are navigating together. Like, what a difficult duality to have to manage. I mean, that's a lot. Like, I can't imagine what that's been like for the two of you to want to celebrate and feel good, but then also reassure and hold your partner close.
It was a week.
Yeah, you know, and going back to that 7 of Wands energy, you know, Aussie, if it's okay to talk about this, you did get a lot of backlash when it came to your level of withdrawal. And I think it was an unnecessary backlash because there was a lack of understanding and a lack of empathy on really what that root cause was. And, you know, at its core, that type of, you know, withdrawal is a learned coping mechanism. And I think for you, it probably kept you safe for a really, really long time. And it probably kept you from experiencing a really intense flood of emotional and physiological stimulation. So people aren't understanding that this coping mechanism developed from a really deep need, and that it was actually, if you want to, we could say it was a really beautiful representation of the psyche protecting itself. And people didn't want to perceive it that way. They wanted to perceive it very differently. So, you know, I think people forget that when someone is experiencing that level of withdrawal, it actually is detrimental to that person to move closer and say, talk to me, do this, like, give me an answer right now, because that fuels this feeling of lack of safety. And it makes the person who's withdrawing want to withdraw even further. So the antidote to that is actually, for Sam in your case, or your trial partner's case, would have been to actually give you space. And I think that would have made viewers very uncomfortable because they would have felt like people were quote unquote giving in to you. And it's so much more than that. Whereas if you were given space, with the understanding that the two of you were going to come back together and, have an emotional exchange and talk about what had happened, you're actually slowly chipping away at that cycle and creating a whole new healthy way of being. And I feel like you didn't get enough credit for that, either of you, really, because Sam, you did a beautiful job at validating Aussie and being there for Aussie and saying, like, I see you, we're working through this. And, I think a lot of people, going back to what you were saying, Aussie, like, have their own experiences, and we're projecting, of course. So I don't want to invalidate that, but I just want to say, well done, But tell me, like, what has that been like for you, experiencing maybe that 7 of Wands energy and that whole withdrawal process and having to work through that?
Yeah. I mean, everything you've said nailed it on the head with everything that I was feeling inside.
Yeah.
I've learned that it is, again, it is a safety mechanism that I developed as a child in order to keep me safe. So, and now that I, in my adult relationships, especially with my intimate partner, that's the response I have, where it feels like, I'm back there, right? And I just need to get away. I just need to, take the time out to re-regulate my body. Otherwise, I know where it's going to head. I know that I'm going to explode. I'm going to say some things that I will regret afterwards. I won't be kind. So I don't want to get there. So I'm monitoring myself, and I need to, I just want to take a break so that I can come back and have a more productive, where my nervous system is back to homeostasis. Yeah. And we're not going to have a huge fight and a huge, World War III kind of explosion. So that was the thing in the experience that I was working with, that in the show that I was working with, that it was hard to see that, or maybe not many people know what that looks like. And that was the reason why I said yes to the show, because I wanted to show people that this exists. This is how it shows up in your intimate relationships. This is what it takes to do the work. This is what it takes from your partner as well. And, it needs to be talked about. I don't think we have enough, well, there's a lot of misinformation out there for sure. So I'm hoping to use that platform now and talking to people like yourself, who is
Absolutely.
Mental health professional as well as, spiritual. Those were the two things I was doing. I was leaning on my spiritual tools, out the experience, to stay present, to monitor my nervous system, so that I don't get dysregulated and have those explosive moments that I won't be proud of. I don't want to be that person, and that's what I'm trying to heal. And you're right. It is, and thank you to Sam to be able to provide that space. And so after the show, we were doing that work where I would sit in the discomfort of coming, back together more and more and more. And Sam would give me space. And so we were doing the, slowly over time, we were able to do that exposure kind of thing, of working with that and building that trust. Because in the experience, in the show, I did not have trust, especially after the first marriage. Yeah. And not having no time in between. It was just going from that to straight into living with Sam. Sam had no idea what had happened. She didn't really get the gravity of what had happened. Nobody did. Oh, I felt so alone in the whole experience. So it was literally a regaining of trust back when we stopped filming to do the work again. So,
well, and that was your first time that you were ever really kind of forced to be on your own too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was the first time where, you dependent on my inner circle of friends, would reach out to them, get their advice. This is a situation I'm in. I didn't have Sam. I couldn't contact her. I was, on my own. So I was navigating everything just really for the first time in a way where I'm like, okay, I usually depend on other people. They don't tell me what to do. And now it's like, I have to learn how to do this myself. So yeah. And again, also culturally, that's how I've been raised, is you don't confront people. You don't bring things up that will put them in a negative light. So things that, so I was learning all of those things. I didn't speak up because I didn't want to, didn't want to be a meanie or, didn't want to negatively shine a light on that person. I gave a lot of passes, oh, maybe they forgot about this, or maybe they thought I meant this. And so there was a lot of not picking up on the red flags, a lot of just shoving things under the carpet, that sort of thing. So yeah, in going from that to our relationship in the show, then it was we were again forced to talk about some of the things that were happening and existing in our relationship before the show, which we wanted to work on, but bringing that whole, kind of the baggage, the safety thing, just not knowing what my reality was, like it was just, not a really good headspace and navigating us. So there was a lot on top of what you saw in the show that was affecting how things were, showing up. So,
and it's like kind of one of the many silver linings that we've gotten out of all of that too is we recognize, one, there's a lot of people in the audiences who have never really experienced what a more traditional Asian household upbringing is like behind closed doors, because it is definitely a cultural thing of like, oh, whatever happens, inside the house doesn't go outside. Everything's perfect all the time. Yeah. And so we had many conversations about this where it's like, it makes sense too that people are reacting in the way that they are because they've literally never seen how it's like behind that layer. And we were able to bring a level of representation to the screen that is not seen. And even still, we don't see a lot of Asian representation. So there's still a blend of Asian plus, some other type of cultural norms, and that's its own separate, different thing to navigate. And so there were just a lot of things that hadn't really been shown before or seen in that way. And then on the other side, we also saw an opportunity of like, oh, we get to also shed light on what it could look like to actually work on a relationship and do work in a relationship. And just because things aren't perfect with it, as long as we're aware of it and not just in something, because we're so used to a toxic environment, for example, that, like doing work in a relationship is not something that is just like, oh, you must just be stuck. And it's like, no, we're actually like doing this together. We're aware of some of these things and we accept the challenges, but we also know on the other side of it that we get to have this closer connection, this stronger level of trust and intimacy, this stronger sense of love. And it's because we're also recognizing our own part of it. We're also recognizing, hey, the person who needs space isn't always just like wrong or running away. And I got to learn more about growing up with an anxious attachment. And so what you don't see or what's not verbally communicated is that I was going through my own journey of learning how to get space.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because I'm over here like wanting to like, what was it like for you? Because you also didn't know what was happening. Like, so here you are, like having to, so please tell me, like, what was that like for you?
Oh, it was so uncomfortable. It was challenging. It was very, very challenging because there was like this sense of like, oh, give this space. But then at the same time, I'm like, but I don't want to be stuck in the same things that are part of the reasons why we got here in the first place, that we couldn't communicate. And so there's so many things that are like running through my head. And then the whole premise of the thing is an ultimatum, right? So then you have that other layer where you're just like, okay, is this the same thing repeating over and over? Or like, are we getting somewhere? But then this person's now telling me they don't trust me. What does that mean? Like, and so there were so many layers to it that in the thick of it, I was just really trying to do my best of just staying aligned and tuned in to myself and recognizing like what was really going on and trying to see through the layers of like, what is a potential repeating pattern? What am I meant to learn something from this? Is this like, what part of Aussie's journey is this? And so, it was definitely a lot more going on than what it looked like.
Yeah. Yeah, and what's so interesting here is, and I don't know if you've realized this or even like viewers have realized this, you showed what it's like to bring previous baggage, like in real time almost, into a relationship without the new partner realizing where these reactions are coming from. And it's so easy to assume, oh, it's because of me, or I did something wrong. And we have this really insular view of what's happening in the relationship instead of being curious about, hey, where do you think this is coming from? Or I noticed that you're feeling a certain way or reacting a certain way. Is this something that you are in the space to explore with me right now? So it was really fascinating, especially the way you talk about how, there was no transition from, partnership with Sam to trial marriage back to Sam. I mean, and same with you, Sam, in your situation. It was just, okay, trial marriage ended. Now you're back together. And Aussie, with you having this, not so great experience, you're bringing all of that heightened energy in. And then Sam, you're probably there going, what the hell is happening? What do I do with this? And we all saw that in real time. So we could see what was happening to Aussie, but you didn't know what was happening to Aussie. So, I mean, and I just want to say your composure was so admirable and so non-reactive. And I think it's so easy to get so defensive in those situations. And I was just so thoroughly impressed. Like, can we just like hang Sam in a photo and say, here, this is the goal, like, like gold star. But I'm curious, like, what was really happening for you though? Like, how were you able to get to that point where you were like, okay, I'm not going to react. I am going to maintain my composure. I am going to do my best to regulate my emotions, because I could see that you were trying to regulate. There was one point when the two of you had just gotten back, I think, to your apartment, and you were laying in bed, and also you were so heightened, you were so elevated, and you had called Sam mate. And I knew right then and there, I was like, Aussie is so elevated and activated right now. And Sam, you pulled back a little bit and you just said, why are you calling me mate? But anyone else who hadn't like gone through or done some work, easily, sorry, I'm just totally calling you out right now, easily could have been like, what the hell's your problem? Gotten up and like slammed the door. You didn't do any of that. And I was so impressed. So please talk to me about like what that was like for you.
I think the easiest answer that I tend to give is really that the more one gets to know themselves, then you can see more clearly when those situations start to happen. Yeah. And so for me, I feel like I was given so many opportunities up until that point to reflect on what it is that I wanted. Mm-hmm. Why were we there? What was, right. Who did I want to be in the more healthy version of what a relationship was? And I like to talk about really the power of intention, because I, like, from day one, and Aussie as well, but just speaking from my experience, from day one, I set such a strong intention that I was there for personal growth. Yeah. I was there to learn. I was there to immerse myself within this experience and trust that we were guided to this for a reason. Mm-hmm. And so if both of us had felt such a strong calling to be guided to some, wild experiment like the one that we were in, there had to be a greater purpose to it. And so choosing to have that trust that I knew that nothing was going to happen that wasn't going to be for our highest good, we needed to come to the acceptance that there were multiple options, that we could have chosen to leave separate. We could have, gone into another relationship, or we could have ended up together. And like, that was something that we really needed to like sit with and accept all possibilities and just have that trust and that faith that we were there for a reason. And so being able to stand strong in that, I feel just made so much difference, because early on, I decided I'm going to do my best to show up as the person I want to be and not stay who I was. This is my practice ground. This is what it's here for. Now, if I can't practice in a practice situation, then I'm done for when it's like a real relationship, because clearly I hadn't figured it out yet. So it was really setting those intentions and standing true to them and knowing who I was and not letting anybody else affect my own perception of myself. Like, that really is it. And easier said than done, I know, but it was just something that I was like, I'm going to do it. And so I just made that my truth during
You know, even the way you're talking about this, I keep thinking about Two of Pentacles for some reason. And like your intention setting is the person holding they're juggling the two pentacles, and one pentacle representing this like maybe version of you or parts of you that you have done a lot of work on, that you feel really grounded and maybe even healed in. And then also juggling the parts of you that you went in wanting to try and explore and figure out. So it's a really beautiful, like the way you described it is really beautiful. And I love this kind of like duality that's present of like acknowledging here's my growth, here's what's existed, and here are parts of me that still have a lot of growth or healing that needs to take place. And, you know, I'm going to be juggling and managing both of these, but I'm here for this purpose. And I think, you know, and this was something that the three of us had talked about previously, the power of intention setting. And I actually just did an episode on the psychology of manifestation and how powerful that process can be when, you know, from not even just a spiritual standpoint, but really a psychological, neurological standpoint, when we go into something, whether it's an experience like you just had or wanting to work on yourself or your relationship, and being really clear about what your values and your expectations are, whether or not it ends, you know, quote unquote, well, you're more likely to be kind of aligned and guided and organized amidst the chaos, which is like essentially going to help you feel more grounded in the process, versus if you had just gone in and been like, whatever happens, happens. I can see people just like swimming and trying to keep their heads above water. So I think that that's really kind of the difference, I think, between your relationship, is you both went in, I think Aussie, you too, with a really strong intention, expectation, and holding true to your values. Which really showed, I feel like.
1,000%. Everything you just said again. Absolutely. In terms of, I knew that this was an opportunity for us to do the work, not just, you know, just the relational work that we were, you know, expected on screen to do, but the deeper work of, okay, what's showing up for me? And, that, you know, the whole thing with, you know, my teacher is Eckhart Tolle, and I want to be, you know, stay present in every moment and not let that dragon out, right? That pain body that he describes out. And that's what I was doing at the changeover, you know, sending love to Mildred across the table, sitting in the myriad of lies and, you know, slander that came across the table. But I was like, I'm not going to shift. I'm not going to hate you. I don't want to do that. I'm still going to sit here. Yeah, it hurts me because I trusted you and I, you know, all of that. It felt like a betrayal, very deep, but I'm not going to hate you. I'm not going to send that back to you. I'm going to sit here and stay present. And so every kind of interaction, it was like doing my spiritual work. And of course, when it comes with Sam, the interaction on the bed, yes, it was heightened because of that day. Earlier that day, I had the, you know, scene outside the restaurant with Charmaine. That was, you know, very deep wound that I hadn't even connected the dots with. Yeah. So, you know, by the end of the night, we're still talking about stuff, and I'm just so tired. So like, and just the, you know, everything that we discussed with the safety issue, the previous, you know, not feeling heard from Sam or what I experienced, it was just all coming out. So, but again, grateful that Sam could hold that space for me, because I wasn't present, right? I lost presence in that moment. Right. And my you know, my pain body did come out, and I called her mate.
Called her mate.
I couldn't call her worse names, but you know, that was my level of my pain body.
We felt it though, Aussie.
Yeah, I did too, and I was not proud of it.
I'm like, that's the equivalent of me looking at my partner and being like, okay, bud. I was like, oh, Aussie is not in a good space right now.
I was definitely trying to distance myself from Sam at that moment, for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. But, it was really great to see the two of you work through so many things. And I feel like it really shone a light on this concept of, again, going back to reactivity that I've talked about, but also this idea of listening to respond versus listening to understand. And I think that's something that the two of you show really well, and that a lot of us can learn, is that, we often go into conversations, disagreements, just wanting to be heard. And so we're only listening to the other person so that we can hear what they're saying, so that we have the next thing to say, instead of listening to them to figure out, okay, how can I actually understand their experience? And I feel like you two do that.
Oh yeah, we try to as much as we can. Obviously, it's hard to tell if something kind of just gets like struck up and not either of us. It's
right.
Hard to tell. But I think one of the things that, because we've put so much intention on like our levels of awareness and trying to like figure these things out and kind of investigate and be and really question things like once we kind of calm down or can have our space to kind of process things. And that, for me personally, tarot has actually been one of the things that have helped me kind of do the processing a little bit faster. I know, to my understanding, not everybody can use cards when they're in a reactive state. But a lot of the times I do have the ability to be able to do that. And for me, it's almost like I just need that like voice to be able to channel through me and almost like knock sense into me or knock awareness into me almost instantaneously. So I can be reacting to something, or I can be feeling these emotions, and I'll pull the card and it's just like this sigh of relief, like, okay, I get it. Like, I know. And sometimes I just have to laugh about it because it's so just like, oh my gosh, this whole big, thing just happened. And it was just that, like, oh my gosh, I thought I was like over this already, but I guess not. And so like we have used it in those moments to kind of almost add that third party voice in a way where it's more immediate than like, not going to wait till talking to somebody, 4 days from now when we're in the thick of it now. So it has allowed us to come to some really, really amazing like epiphanies and realizations, and do some really deep healing work at the same time. And just, out of nowhere. And we get to laugh at it of like, oh my gosh, it was not about, I don't know, like the changing the channel.
Right. Never is. Never about the dishes.
Yeah.
It's never about the trash, the remote.
So we're getting better at the whole tracing the dots back. Okay, it wasn't that. It was actually this.
I love that that's what you've pointed out has been really helpful. And I'm curious, what does your process look like with each other when tarot is that kind of neutral third party, or maybe even that couples therapist for you in that moment? Like, does one of you initiate? Are the cards just always around? Is there a ritual behind it? Like, talk to me about what that process is like for you.
Well, I know my last one, when I know it was my thing. I know that it was my thing because I could still feel like I was not okay with whatever we talked about, So when that was the case, I think it's different in every moment too, at every situation. So I felt in that moment that I wanted to pull the card on my own, and because usually, like I said, 90% of the time, Sam, I would ask Sam, can you pull a card for me? But this time I felt the urge to do it myself, and I did. And it was just so on point with, the thing I wasn't able to kind of put to rest or like accept or be okay with, that I was able to just go, okay. And it is, I felt the urge to do it. I knew I was going to get the answer. I definitely got the answer. So you can't refute that. You cannot you still have free will to do that.
Sure.
But what's the point in that?
Right.
You're going to be like a child and be like, well, I don't like this answer. I'm just going to keep spinning my wheels and still be mad at this and still not okay with it. So it helps so much in having that direct kind of line to your higher self, to source, to even your inner child, to be able to go, okay, that's what it was, and I can accept that, I can see that, and I'm gonna show up for me. So it's for the work that you're doing is for you, so that you can show up better for other people in your life and hence your community. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's a blend of a lot of things too. And it's not just the spirituality aspect. For a short period of time, we were even like in a leadership coaching like cohort together. And that gave us a different level of understanding. And then we also love incorporating human design. And so understanding Aussie is the type that's called a manifester. I'm what's called a projector, and understanding that dynamic. And so all of these different systems kind of add a different level of understanding to our relationship. And so it could be something as simple as just setting the stage when we're going to have a conversation, or recognizing really early on of like, oh, hey, I'm actually not looking for feedback in this situation. I'm just looking to like tell you something. Or even just yesterday, I think it was, where I was like, hey, I really just want you to celebrate with me right now. I'm not looking for any kind of like opinions or thinking about the future or trying to map everything out. I just want to like sit in the appreciation of this moment. And so there was a little pushback at first, but then it avoided a lot of that miscommunication. And so it's like, it doesn't even have to be just straight spirituality or straight therapy or straight this. It's like, there's always so many different systems that we can just add and gain a little bit of understanding and awareness from, that can be so helpful in just getting on the same page.
I'm a big fan of Dr. Harville Hendrix's work, Imago therapy, Imago image, and communication framework, and nonviolent communication. So I've applied it with us, and we've had success with that. I try to apply it in the experience in the show, but I didn't show much of that. But it's a framework that I like to, so there's lots of tools that we have at our fingertips that we can apply and use, and what feels right. What we're called to use, or like you said yesterday, like I'm not looking for any opinions here. I just want to celebrate with you. So
and that's something, even just that advice right there, or letting us into that part of your relationship, that's something that I feel like couples come to me with an issue for like so often, where I just say, okay, ask this person if they are wanting comfort or if they're wanting solutions. Like, that way you're not in, because, so many people get uncomfortable when something's shared and they're like, okay, what am I supposed to do with this information? I'm used to like providing a solution or providing input. And, we have to, help guide and teach and help people unlearn, just like they have to help guide and teach and help us unlearn and relearn. And that's a really good way to do that, is by saying, actually, what I need in this moment is for you to celebrate with me. Nothing more. Just give me a high five. Great job. Love you.
Yes. And so it's like a blend of having the tools, but then also having the self-awareness to know, what do I need in this moment and what am I looking for? Right. And recognizing that Aussie is thinking that I'm looking for something else, or maybe that's just like the natural thing to do in that situation. So it's like, it's only going to cause some kind of like frustration if we're both wanting different things, or like asking for different things, or giving different things. So that has just been really helpful. One of the other things too is using intuition as well. And so there have been really funny moments where like Aussie, for example, might be asking me for advice, and I'll be like, are you sure you're ready for the advice? Are you in a space to actually hear me? And then Aussie,
you receive this.
Yes. And Aussie's like, yes. And I'm like, are you sure? Yes. I'm like, are you really sure?
Last chance.
I'm like, I am like, gone are the days where I just like offer advice and guidance even if I'm being asked, if I feel like it's not even like, if the door's not open.
Right. Yeah, that level of like being receptive is really important because, we might assume that someone's like ready to hear something or, because we've, it's like the balance of being a therapist, right? It's like, ooh, I've picked up on something. I tell my clients this all the time. I'm like, I'm going to share something with you, but you might not be ready to hear it. And if you aren't, that's okay. We can table it. We'll put it on the shelf. We'll revisit it later. But I feel like it's important to just like share right now. And I might say like, hey, like, is this happening? And then they, if there's a reaction, I'll be like, okay, like too much too soon, So I love that you're saying, I'm trusting my intuition and I'm also, giving Aussie this, out. Like, are you sure? Because, this might not be all lovey-dovey.
We've learned. We've had like trial and error. Yeah.
The thing is, we've also learned how to incorporate play into our healing work.
So glad you said that.
Always have to be heavy. It doesn't.
Yes.
Please talk about that.
Yeah. I'm definitely someone that will contradict myself a lot. And that's why Sam always says, are you sure about this? Are you sure? And she has, when it comes to my own self, I have a bit of a block. So she always says, are you sure? And she uses her intuition and she knows me really well. So she sometimes can see like 10 steps forward where I can't. And so, but now we're able to learn that, okay, if she can prepare me and go, really, I'm really asking you, are you sure you're going to hear this? Then I can take a step back and go, oh, okay, wait a minute. Am I feeling okay today? Am I on edge? Am I trying to defend myself? Am I trying to prove myself to something, like for something? So I can do that reflective work. And I'm like, okay, actually I'm not in a good space today to hear something that might, not be so comforting. So I can go, okay, yeah, let's table that and I'll ask you tomorrow. So but also we can joke about it. you can, Sam, so you can tell more about this.
Oh, well, I was going to say one of the things that came to mind is like, there have been a couple of times that, because we kind of just like, I kind of joke like the Joker of like, it was serious kind of thing.
Yeah, that's good.
Like things to like lighten the mood, because like sometimes Aussie doesn't even realize that like this serious mode has just overtaken everything. And so there have been moments too where Aussie is just kind of like pouting around, and I'll just like grab Aussie's arms and just like start dancing. Like, it just like softens, and eventually all of a sudden this inner child comes out. And so it's like
sometimes
that's so sweet.
I get on this like mind thought that I'm just in my head and just thinking. That's my Gemini, that's my air signs. But Sam will snap me out of it and we'll just start dancing, and then the play comes in, and then it's just kind of like, oh yeah, I was being too, I was overthinking that. I was over, moving around on that thing. I should have just let go. So yeah.
What you're describing too is, and I love when I see themes. I feel like I've been in my practice, there's themes that come up where I feel like I'm talking about the same thing, like everyone that week. And I feel like, it's interesting you're bringing something up that I feel like I've talked about all week. And it's the importance of balance in a partnership. And the two of you talking about that play and, Aussie, your level of seriousness, and Sam, your ability to kind of lighten the mood is really important, because if you were both so serious or both so playful, it might have taken you longer to get to the point where you're at. And it's not that, if you're two people are very similar, it's wrong or not compatible or not going to work. It's just, you have to be really aware of that, because then someone's going to have to maybe do more work to step outside of their seriousness or step outside of their playfulness. And it seems like the two of you have this kind of natural ability to say, hey, let's play, or hey, we got to be a little bit more serious now. And there's seems to be this level of respect for the other person's ability to be playful and serious and welcome the other person into that space with them. So, I think what you're describing is this really perfect balance. And it's also really important to be able to have playfulness, because just life in general is so serious. And even the topics we're talking about today are so serious. So, I tell everyone, we need to be able to laugh. I tell my clients, you're going to cry with me, but you're going to laugh too. Like, we have to be able to laugh and have fun, because what even is life,
Absolutely. 1,000%. Yeah. I think, yeah, like you said, we as we grow into adulthood, I think we forget to play. We forget that, inner child that's in us, that we have to remind ourselves every so often. Yeah, that is super important in a relationship for it to have its zest and life. So yeah, play is huge.
And even tarot as well, because think about how many decks you have. I mean, that in of itself is really creative and playful because they elicit different parts of ourself. And sometimes, the cards that we're using might be darker, more somber, more shadow work focused, and other cards might be really playful and carefree and focused on, childlike versions of ourselves. So being able to be in tune, and that's something that the theme that you two have talked about a lot, is just really being in tune with all these different parts of yourself, the parts that are present in the relationship and the parts that are present on an individual level. So really it's about being curious too. Like, what part needs attention today? What part needs to be put to bed today? And I think that's a really good lesson to learn, is that we are so multifaceted and dynamic, and it's not just one version of ourselves that we need to pay attention to. It's multiple versions,
right? And I think I totally feel the whole recurring theme thing that just happens. I feel like I'm saying the same thing in a different way. For me, it's actually been a lot about ethical readings. And so that also applies to reading responsibly within the relationship. And so there are moments, for example, where I will refuse to pull a card and I will just say no. And Aussie will be like, why? Pull me the card, please. And I'm not going to, because this is the question that keeps being asked. And we can't just keep asking the same question, hear the answer and say, I don't like that. Tell me again. And I'm like, so no, that eventually can get to the point where it's not helpful. And so even still, when it comes to pulling our own cards, there are some times where Aussie needs to pull the card personally, because any message that comes through me might be perceived as biased or will be perceived as me inputting my own, opinions into it and pretending it's coming from source or the universe. And so there is that level of mindfulness that also needs to have this level of care. So it's not being abused, not being read, even as a reader myself, not using it in a way where I'm just using the cards to tap into Aussie, without permission, or trying to just almost manipulate a situation. That would not be an ethical thing for me to do. And I absolutely do not do that. So, yeah.
Really good to hear that. I think that's where, because I tend to read the cards just from a personal self-reflective healing standpoint. And a lot of readers aren't comfortable reading for themselves, so they won't pull cards. But, I feel like there's so much value in it. And I think a lot of the value comes from exactly what you just said. There's a source of empowerment that can come from saying, no, hold on, it's my responsibility to pull this card for myself and figure out what's happening and look at myself and have my own projections on this card. Because, like we mentioned earlier, regardless, if you feel like you can be completely unbiased, the person who's reading for you is still having their own personal experience of what's happening with this card. So, I think there's so much value in being able to say, no, I need to pull this card for myself. And for you to be able to say, I think that you need to pull this card for yourself is really important. So I love that you brought that up. I feel like it's a topic of discussion that doesn't come up much, but that's a whole other episode. I feel like I've kept you all for quite a while now. So I'm curious, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to bring up? Is there anything that you want to share before we wrap up?
I think we covered a really good grounds. Yeah.
This is a great conversation. And if we think of more, we can always just do another one.
Yeah, please. Seriously, you're welcome back anytime. And I appreciate you both so much. I think you're so great. I love talking to you.
I'm talking to you, Shannon. Yes. Definitely feel like you're a soul family.
Thank you so much for listening to The Tarot Diagnosis. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok under the handle @TheTarotDiagnosis and join us while we pull daily cards and explore tarot and mental health in between podcast episodes. You can also subscribe to our podcast to make sure that you never miss an episode. If you have a topic or question that you'd like for us to explore on the podcast, you can contact us directly on our website, www.thetarotdiagnosis.com.